you a brief introduction of myself. I'm Gorgi. I work at the Center for Social Investment at Heidelberg University. Don't be fooled by Ashoka Europe. This is just our colleagues being kind enough to lend us their platform. So I work there as a researcher. I've been lead developing the Accelerating Investment Readiness MOOC. And I and we have been very pleased to be able to solicit such a wonderful lineup of speakers for the webinar series. Last week we had Ben Carpenter from Social Value International and Yoongjin Choi from Fineo, who were talking about impacts. And today we will have, as I said, Alessandro Rancati, who can also tell us a little bit about himself as he starts presenting from the European Commission's Joint Research Center. And this session will be focused on strategy, especially on integrated strategy. And what we mean thereby is a strategy that has an ecosystems focus and that really looks into how actors can collaborate in order to create social impact and create positive social change. And Alessandro is going to present to us the Social Economy Canvas, which is a very new tool developed by the JRC, but also by DG Grow, as I learned from Ola Engelmann. Apologies that I didn't recognize that earlier. I think that's very important because it's actually a collaboration between two big DGs. And it's not just a fancy tool that you can use in your free time, but it's actually meant to help entrepreneurs and other organizations basically in an ecosystem around social economy, social impacts to create this together. So I'll just hand over the word to Alessandro. As last time, just please do gather your questions in the chat as we have the chat function, and then we can always get back to those. And I'll be just posting these information that I was just giving you into the chat as well, so that everyone can refer to them. So please, Alessandro, the stage is yours.
Super. Thanks a lot. So my name is Alessandro Rancati. I work at the Joint Research Center. It's a Directorate General of one of the Directorate Generals of the European Commission, and it's a horizontal directorate. So we provide services to all the other Directorate Generals, like DG Grow, for example. And the kind of services we provide is mostly focused on scientific advice and evidence for policymaking. And in this case, in reality, we are also bringing some innovative methods and new ways of working. My formation, I'm a designer. I'm an architect and designer, let's say. I graduated at the Politecnico of Milan. And so I'm bringing in competences in, let's say, strategic design, and this is part of the competences of a let's say a kind of a special unit that is called the EU Policy Lab inside the Joint Research Center. And the example or the project that I'm going to present is one of the examples of how we kind of start to merge methods and approaches that come from design into the processes of developing policy making. I will give a very, let's say, overall introduction. It's not going to be very specific. I recognize in the name some of the people that have been already in other presentations and so on. I hope they won't be too disappointed, because this is really going to be a very general overview of the tool. Also, I would like to say that this is still in a prototype phase, so it's not yet a policy tool, a proper policy tool, but we hope we can get there. And the way we also hope to get there is in a participatory way. So we're getting all the feedbacks from stakeholders and so on. So before I start with the presentation, I'm going to share my screen and start by saying who is the canvas intended to help. And you see here that we have essentially three targets. One is the public of the entrepreneurs. We're talking about social economy, and we're talking about the kind of activity that is not focusing only on profit. And so it's a form of activity that sometimes or oftentimes need to really explain the essence of what is being done to to clearly see what's the difference between their form of economy or the added value of what they do beyond let's say the economic profit. So this is already something that is kind of difficult to capture, and so we need something that helps to capture that. And then, of course, we need to have to help this an ecosystemic perspective. So we're not talking about the typical trade or typical commercial activity where you have a client and or a service provider or a manufacturer, and then you have all the different, let's say, elements of the value chain. The second group of let's say persons that we want to serve are those who work in support agencies and the investors. And this is, in a certain sense, the challenge is a bit the same. If the entrepreneurs cannot show clearly what their added value is, support agencies and investors can see it. And so they need something that can visualize clearly what the entrepreneurs are doing, and also the essence of an idea and the added value of that idea. And finally, policymakers, because obviously we're working with and for our colleagues in DG GROW and in general in the rest of the Commission. And what they need is to understand how this difficult concept that now is very entangled plays out in different parts of Europe. So the challenge in reality is to show without a clear definition, because with a clear definition, we risk of let's say, not including all the forms of social economy that are happening in Europe. So try to understand what this concept means, what the social economy is, how it manifests in the different activities across Europe. So the idea is to move from something like this to something like this, which is something that still is not really coherent. It cannot be used other than for building something. Okay, so the idea is that we kind of create a tool that helps to build the kind of fabric that we want. And so this kind of tool at the same time enables us to make something, but at the same time also it should help us to recognize what it's actually social economy in this case, and what it maybe looks like, but in reality it's not. We use a visual approach because it's kind of what we derive from as a method from design, because in this let's say ecosystemic approach, we need to have a awareness of several different elements and how they play against each other or with each other. So we need to have a level of understanding that goes beyond what a written text can do or what a typical report can do. And this also, it's kind of the way that supports conversation that are complex, but at the same time really focused on specific dimensions. Of course, the social or the canvas for social economy is not let's say the only tool available. There are other tools like the social business model canvas that is derived by the business model canvas that we most of us probably know. The big difference is that while the traditional, let's say, business model canvas helps to bring everything together in one place, the one that we're designing or that we're developing is focused on highlighting the relationships, flows, and the different identities of the different actors or agents that work in the system. So it's kind of a different approach, and then it is also true that in the social business model canvas or in the business model canvas, at the end of the day, the terminology, the way of saying things is very connected to the traditional way of thinking about business, and we want to move a little bit beyond that. So what do we map? How do we disentangle all these dimensions? Well, we decided to focus on two different levels. One is a more of a macro level, which you see here described as the landscape. And second is more of a macro level, so the level of the project, the level of the activity, the level of the small business, and to try to understand and say, yeah, to really try to understand where is the added value. Is it related to how innovative the product is or the service is? So is it really a matter of what we could call social innovation? So I produce a service that is radically innovative in terms of the societal benefits that it brings, or is it that I'm producing something that is really not so innovative, like a yogurt, but what is really innovative is how I produce that yogurt. I make the example of the yogurt because, for example, there's a company in Catalonia called Da Fageda, and what they do is they produce yogurt like just like Danone does, for example. But what they do is that they employ certain people. They have a certain structure in their organization that redistribute the benefits in a radical way, and they also have a, let's say, attention to the environment, to the whole environmental dimension. So the product in itself is not innovative, but what is innovative really is how things are done. And so we kind of need to bring together or to understand all these different dimensions. And so if the way we work on this is we have tools. We have prepared a little kit for mapping the landscape. Of course, we cannot use it now, so we have moved to an online equivalent, which is not as nice and not as rich, but it does the job. With this tool, what we map is essentially the key actors and the key exchanges. And so this is a picture of an early example. So, but the idea is that we have codified certain symbols. So this, let's say, solid line represents beneficiaries. The colored hexagon represent the project group or the people who are really working and collaborating on the project. And with the dash line, we let's say map all those who are not the direct beneficiaries and that are helping the project. So in social economy, you can see, for example, even the example of crowdfunding, at least the way it was intended, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where you fund a project not just because you want something in return, or not just because maybe they're proposing a product that is interesting, a bit like we're doing now, but the product is not there, so you give them trust that they will deliver what they are proposing. But in the original also idea of crowdfunding, you had all these examples where you were simply funding a project because it was nice or because you liked the idea, you didn't expect anything in return. In reality, no? So in that case, I would be, you would be represented here as a part, a contributor to the project, but you're not really the beneficiary. And so, and what we map over here, this is a project that essentially this group is providing a space for these 4 categories of people: elderly, kids, teen, and adults, to meet, to create bonds, to create a sense of community, and so on. And they use a space from a local windmill and a local museum, and they're getting support from public administration. So here what we're mapping is the flow of money, which is in blue. So we can understand where this activity gets the money from. But we can also map the exchange of goods and services. So we map the idea of, well, we map that the windmill and the museum is providing space. We map the exchange of knowledge. So the project group is training some of these people. In return, they're getting labor. So, sorry. So these people, let me see if typical glitch. Too much. I don't know what's happening now. Back to, yes. Yeah, now it's not coming up anymore. Okay, now, so these people, I was saying, they give in return. Okay, they give in return labor. So the project group trains adults and elderly. The adults and elderly help them doing sessions in this common space, and you see that there is a lot of knowledge and information exchange between these four actors. And then you see this little yellow label, which represent what we call the intangibles, but the intangible meant as exchange of, for example, trust, reputation, or exchange of all these elements that are really creating bonds, or they are creating self-respect, or they are creating, let's say, something that has a, let's say, a societal impact. And so by doing this, automatically we have a picture of, let's say, all the different actors, and you can start looking at it in a strategic way. No? So, for example, I would question if we are so dependent from the financing of one actor, what kind of activities or what kind of decisions we need to take so that we're not so dependent from this. So how can we become more resilient? No? And this is something that you can do essentially by having all this element visualized in one place. And of course, you can run this exercise among the group that is, let's say, the project group, but you could easily invite any of these actors and discuss with them and get the ideas from the different perspectives, so that you can kind of even develop or co-develop your business model or your service and your offer in a collaborative way. So this is a bit one of the benefits of using this kind of approach for, let's say, the landscapes. And then we have the second part, which is what we call the identity. Okay, the identity has a basic structure that is a basic triad, and the three vertices are collecting dimensions that help to define what is useful to create societal regeneration, or to regenerate the environment, or to regenerate our idea of economy. And this is obviously the triple bottom line framework, which is what inspires us, but it's also the let's say, the framework that inspires the Sustainable Development Goals. And here you have how an example of how each one of the Sustainable Development Goals can be placed in let's say, this framework that we have created. The big difference between let's say the goal approach or the target approach and this approach that we're proposing is that we don't want to focus on one dimension in particular. We want to have a complete overview, because sometimes what also happens in social economy is that a company highlights, or let's say emphasizes, one element of what they're doing, but then they're which is very beneficial, but then there are other parts of their business that are all so detrimental that whatever they do as a benefit is actually less beneficial than the things that they do that are negative. And let's say typical greenwashing or social washing, or however you want to call it. So I present you a very nice picture. I'm helping a small local community, but in reality, I'm polluting the environment around me. So that's kind of what we try to avoid. And with a picture that is more, say, organic and complete, it's easier to spot what's wrong and even how it can be improved. Behind this project, there is this idea of moving past this, say, more economic viewpoint, and so we also developed a kind of a narrative or a metaphor that supports the tool, which is the vitality, the level of vitality. And so we use a color coding taken from the leaf of a tree. This tree is very symbolic for Europe, so it's not also chosen with a purpose, and what we want to do is essentially transfer this into the canvas, and by let's say answering to a certain set of questions, we can define if each one of these hexagon or leaves is green, or if it's kind of turning yellow, or if it's brown, or absolutely it's not even there. Okay, so the idea is that with this approach, we have a picture of all the different dimensions that help to create the proposition of the company. Okay, so here we have two examples. One, this one to the right is a traditional graphic design agency taken as an example. So you see that some of the dimensions are absolutely not even interesting or not relevant, simply because that's how it is. And on this other side, we have a mapping of it's a cooperative that works here in Belgium. It provides green management services, but with the, let's say, an ecosystemic approach and a biodiversity approach. So they don't, for example, they don't cut the grass every other day. They let the grass grow. They let the grass make flowers and so on. And they also educate and explain why the garden doesn't look clean. It looks messy, and why it's a benefit to have the garden messing for a week or two. And it's better than having it always at the same, very good looking, but then not really helping the environment. And on top of that, they also employ people with what we call distance from the labor market. So they're really regenerative in both this dimension, and then they have let's say a cooperative approach. So even they're thinking about the model of growth and the model of redistribution and the care for economic care for people is really kind of in line with what we would understand as a best case for social economy. So this is what I would stop the presentation. And maybe if we have collected some questions, we can start answering. If there are direct reactions, of course, we can open the floor.
Thanks very much, Alessandro. So we already had one question from Bruce. I'll get back to that right away. So thanks very much for this interesting presentation. And I'll encourage everyone else to just gather their questions. There's another one from Lavinia, so that we can keep the discussion going. I think what I can definitely stress is that the social economy canvas as a tool fits well into the ideas that we're trying to promote in relation to integrated strategies. So both in the sense of how does an external focus and embedding oneself in a bigger ecosystem help the organization move forward? How does it help the ecosystem? And how does that actually tackle social problems more effectively, or how does that contribute to it? And I think that's a good addition, but also you were outlining earlier, Alessandro, that there are still open questions in terms of how to fine tune, how to make it even more valuable. So these would be things that we would love to discuss. So I'll give the word to Bruce, who was thinking about and inquiring about a framework that might be useful to embed the social economy canvas in.
Thank you. When I heard the sort of that fundamental triad about the individuals and the flows and the collaboration, it reminded me very much of a framework for structuring productive dialogue in communities called the process Enneagram. It was developed by Richard Knowles maybe 15, 20 years ago. And it really is also rooted in complexity and complex systems dynamics, as I know you are. And I was curious if this was something that you were aware of, or it had, it looked at in some connection in some way to the social economy canvas. Thanks.
You're welcome. I was not aware directly of that, but I think it resonates because in reality there is a strong connection, as you know, with this approach and the Kinefin framework and Dave Snowden and so on. So this idea of working with even an indirect inquiry, you know. So it's the idea of yeah, letting the results emerge without starting from a preconceived say target, no? Which is a bit the typical way of research or the way of research that we are more used to. And so, and this is one also, I mean, it was really, really useful and good to have this approach from DigiGrow that was saying, we don't want to start from a definition, because starting from the definition automatically restricts everything, creates boundaries that are too strong, and we risk of losing really the richness of what this is at the European level, no? And so we need to really start to or go back to watching what's happening on the ground, create a proper framework, and then from that we can inform decisions.
A question relating directly to that, Alessandro. So, how are you imagining the process or the transition of this into something that will be solid in a way? Right now, as what I hear is that it's still a lot in flux, and you're trying to do this also bottom up, which I think is a very worthwhile effort. But how do you imagine to process all this information and take it on board in order to solidify the social economy canvas?
Okay, there is, let's say that we are, I don't know if I could say 65%, 70% there, because the landscape mapping, I think it's solid. It is doable. It can be done in sessions of 1 to 2 hours. We have experimented that already a sufficient number of times. And what it creates is these mappings that can be essentially read by anyone who's familiar with the basic codes. Okay, because that's plus now that we are moving into this kind of digital whiteboard, it's even easier because, you know, it's there already. You don't even have to process it. The problem is that there are certain let's say assumptions or let's say making sense of all the different maps is something that it's done, and it will be done visually by people, right? So for example, we can start to see that we usually have very short, what we call short value chains. We don't have a lot of intermediaries happening. And so this is already something that we could start saying, okay, this is appearing in a lot of different cases. And so maybe this is one of the driving dimensions of social economy. Okay. In other cases, we see that the dimensions are more or less proportional between them, or that the projects, most of the projects are really small businesses, that they're small and so on. So there are these kind of reflections that are already, you know, we can already do. But I can imagine that if we started to develop a system that is even with an app and so on, that could measure distances, that could automatically measure, say, the width of the flows and associate those with certain values and so on, then we could have a little bit more of data-driven analysis of this mapping. So now at the moment it's not possible because we're using a regular, let's say, whiteboard application, but just by developing an application like that, we would start associating a certain flow of money with the actual numbers, with the projections for the future or the past and so on. So it could become richer, right? But at the moment, I think that even to inform policy, that could be useful, because I mean, you're really having a lot of different snapshots of a lot of different realities across Europe, and they're all consistent, at least in the way they are recorded. The other part that needs to be, let's say, improved from the usability point of view, but also from, let's say, the data, is the part of the questions. So I didn't go too much into detail. If anyone is interested, just let me know, because we do a session only on that, because we probably need only 1 hour for that. But we have like 54 different questions, because we have 54 different dimensions. And each question, or each, let's say, each dimension has sometimes 10 parameters that we're checking. So we have really a lot of things. And we want to make sure, in a certain sense, that this question and these parameters make sense, first of all, but then also we need to kind of decide together even what each one of these parameters, how much it counts towards the leaf turning green or turning brown. Okay, so these are not rules. This is also almost a part of policy design, because you know, once we decide that this becomes brown or green, then automatically we are also pushing, in a certain sense, certain developments or certain values versus others. And so, and this is what we're developing now. There is a method put in place. We're going to, if you're interested, you're invited next week, if I believe correctly, in Friday next week. There is going to be a mapping of an identity of a company, of actually an association in south of Spain, and we're going to test this method. And it's a mix of, since the questions are so many, the first thing that we ask is, what do you think you're better at? What question you really resonates with what you do, and you know that, yeah, I'm 100% sure that I can perform very well on this. And then we have a session of more detailed question to check if we're talking about the same thing or not. So if you're interested in a practical example, there's going to be a follow-up on this, and of course you're very welcome to participate. But so this is to give an idea of what is there and what needs to be still worked on.
Yeah, so basically what I hear are two things. That one thing is that you need to benchmark in some way, right? Gather, and the other thing is that you need big data in a way. And if you see into the future, right? Trying to aggregate, trying to have these thresholds where, when do you decide whether it's turning green or staying brown?
Yes, it's a potential.
Are there patterns that are being reproduced across, you know, similar types of organizations or similar types of environments and so on? So that's
exactly. And of course, we're confident that this is going to happen little by little. I mean, social economy has been, in a certain sense, in the back burner, or as a bit, you know, the small brother of serious and real economy. You know? But it looks like it's getting really a lot more tractions. You know, if you're following the commission now, you're starting to hear commissioners talking about ecosystems, talking about resilience, and so on. And so these things start to become, you know, taken a bit more seriously. The fact that you need to, of course, you need to create profit, but if you're damaging the environment, or you're creating an environment for people that is not, you know, you can't. Essentially, it's not the future. So we need to start to have tools that bring all these dimensions together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll take up the impulse next from Lavinia. And please all just keep thinking about questions or discussion points that you might have, and just raise them through the chat so that I'm aware. So Lavinia, if you want to, I can pass on the word to you, which is relating to you know, the effort, or how do organizations actually do that. But I just saw that you unmuted yourself, so please, Lavinia.
Hi, it's Lavinia here. The signal, so I'll be very short, because more or less my question has been answered in the previous discussion. So I've changed it a little bit. Maybe some tips and like medium size of a project which can be related to like any type. So I don't know, training purposes, or something which implies teaching kids or things like this. Like, how would you start from scratching within this, so that you can apply this method easily? Yeah, 2 or 3 tips and tricks. I think that would be more or less to the domain, be also general. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Lavinia. Your sound slipped once or twice, so I'm trying to just summarize what I heard. So one thing I would still maybe want Alessandro to react on is the time it takes for organizations to do this. So you were saying the ecosystems mapping as such is only 1 or 2 hours, but really going deep, maybe understanding these different flows, I suppose, might just take longer. And something else that Lavinia was, I think, interested in is, can you give some sort of generalized examples in specific interventions, or with regard to specific organizations, how you would tackle this task of going about developing this social economy canvas for these types of organizations.
Okay, I'll share again the screen. So meanwhile, I show you the platform that we have online for the social economy community, and you have the link to the social economy canvas, and in here you have all the tools at the latest level of development. You can download them. You have a bit more of a instructions on how to use them and so on. No? But just keep in mind that the idea is that even you know, we're open for everyone to just design their own method. You know, myself, I'm a bit against this like kind of design thinking approach where you come with a particular process, you come with particular tools, and automatically, you know, you have the solution and everything works well. The idea is that part of the good thing of tools is that you can change them and adapt them to the actual context where you have to analyze or to help. So the idea is that the canvas should help. Let me also copy this and I'll put it in the chat. The canvas is mostly useful when we have an initial idea that we want to develop. So have a group of people and they have a service or a product, and they start to think about, okay, who do we benefit, you know, who could help, and so on. So that's the basic level. Level 2 is a company or SME that has already something in place, and that maybe would like to see what it means to transfer or to transition their activity into something that would be, let's say, compatible or beneficial to society and environment. So that's the other thing. So or an activity that is already a part or consider themselves part of the social economy, to see how well they're doing or not. And the size is, let's say, the tool it works well when we can map, let's say, one activity. So a complex company that has 3 or 4 or 5 different activities that they related to each other and so on, then I think they should take the perspective of one of those activities and then map that activity in relation maybe with the other activities that they have, but as one of the partners or one of the communities and so on. So because what we really need to understand is how those things work. We cannot have an overall generic definition of what we do. So because that's a crucial part. So it's intended to understand, let's say, one activity. And the timing is, it's a couple of hours, we said, and the effort implied, I see here, no, for it's unique for each project, yes, but that's why this could be potentially a tool that development agencies can use, because you have the different agencies that give support to entrepreneurs to set up their business model, to set up their the financials, or the I mean, that's what it's for, no? So it is a tool to think, and so we are ready if we open a business or we think, we spend a lot of time in thinking. And so this the added value of this is that you don't only think for yourself, but you put in a place that is visible for others, and while you think, you're also creating, let's say, the communication tool that is effective enough for I don't know, an entrepreneur or that wants to help, or an investor to say, okay, I trust in what you're creating over here, it makes sense, and so on. And in a very, very simple, we had a session, I think it was in Dublin, with I think it was 200 or 300 students. They had a hackathon on ideas for projects and so on, and they used it in a very, very simple way. They used the big triad, and they asked the students to put the logo of their idea in the position where they think it was more beneficial. So it's a more society, more environmental, more about the economic model, and so on. So that it can be used, very basic level, down to, I don't know, session of hours, because we need to really kind of define in detail of what we need to do.
Maybe one addition from my side. What I really liked when you were saying this, because it wasn't sort of any agreement that we had earlier on, but you were saying that you should focus on one intervention, one activity, rather than bundling these, right? Because you want to really get an in-depth picture of what's going on. And that exact argument we always make in relation to impact measurement, right? So you can't really have an organization that has 10 different products or does 10 different things and then try to just, grasp everything in one go. But rather you should go into the intervention, into the activity, and really understand how you create this impact. And in this sense, you're also making the argument for really understanding what your partners are, what the ecosystem is composed of in relation to that one activity, unless it's one that's very similar to some others. I think that's a very sensible and very important message to give to people, because you often see these catch-all approaches where they are just going about everything, and they're trying to outline the good or evil they are doing, basically putting it almost into this dichotomy to the world, and that doesn't really, in my view, doesn't really help understand impact. And what you were saying is also that it wouldn't really help in fine-tuning or developing a strategy.
Yeah, but and sorry if I just bounce on that, because this is also the typical problem of working in silos. No, you may have an organization that potentially, as a byproduct, is producing something that is useful for another part of the same company, but since there is not this vision, one part of the company is having problems to throw away this byproduct, and the other company is having problem to find that raw matter for their process. No, and I mean, this is and it could help with things, but it could help with a lot with knowledge. And if we look at a large organization, even like the Commission, we have the silos, and this approach, what it does in terms of once you see the exchanges, you say, oh, okay, this knowledge is coming already from here, so I don't have to go out, or I don't have to kill myself to find where it comes from. Now I see that it comes from here, and I could go and talk to my colleagues, for example. No? So this is a bit what kind of one of the benefits of also working in this way.
Mm-hmm. One additional follow-up I had was in relation that you started off mentioning the social business canvas, right? And you said that the main value added that the social economy canvas was providing is that you have a dynamic perspective in there. You don't only have the static picture, and also still, although it's obviously composed of these jigsaw pieces of a bigger puzzle, it's still individual pieces, and you don't really see the relations. You don't really have time in there. So what I was wondering is really, how do you move from the static picture to a dynamic one? And also when it comes to organizations really applying this, can organizations really do this on their own? Would it be good to sort of pair up with other organizations? Would it be good to have some sort of advice in relation to how to do this? So how would you, what is sort of the difficulty threshold and the complexity of this whole thing that's involved in the process? I mean, Bruce earlier just mentioned that it's really related to complex systems, and of course there's a different degree to which you can go into depth, but it is certainly something that's not something that you do just alongside or spontaneously, but that really needs investment, I think.
I think it's a bit now it's probably something new, and so you need the new competences, or you need the people who are open to start to include these competences into the group of people who are part of the organization, right? And it's a bit like saying, suddenly you discover that design can help, but no one knows how to design in the company, so we need to hire a designer, and so we bring design into this. At the beginning, it's difficult. A lot of mistakes are done and so on, but you, in a certain sense, you cannot move to a different level if you don't start to integrate new competences. So how easy a company would integrate this? I would say, if it's clearly working in social economy, what I'm seeing is that they don't even need to learn because it's exactly the way they're thinking already. So it's kind of it resonates a lot, and the process or the tool and so on may be a little bit different, but they maybe have already often developed things that are very similar to this or that go in the same direction. For a more traditional company, of course, the big question is, well, where are the numbers? Where where's the financials and all these kind of things? And so you need to kind of get used to it. And even before then, the big question is, yeah, but this will take a long time to, it's a lot of time just discussing these things, and we need to do things, right? And that's I think a part of a bit this attempts to move beyond what we're used to, and incorporate maybe even a little bit more of a strategic thinking as part of what we do seriously before we decide what to do. No, and we know a lot of companies that they say, I have the idea, I know that this is the way to go, and so let's do it. And then down the line, you see that you have to convince people that this is the solution. No? It's a bit, if I may be a little bit polemic, it's a bit what's happening with AI, blockchain, and all this kind of, we have the solution. This is exactly the new hammer. You can nail down new kinds of nails, and then say, yeah, for what? Does it really make sense? No, and so, of course, it makes sense, but it's easier to incorporate those technologies once you have clear, let's say, even the societal or environmental purpose, than saying, okay, I just have a solution. Let's see how it works. And I'm not against that. I'm working. We're having conversation with Seeds, for example, which is this. They're working on a kind of a cryptocurrency or an idea of bringing that in. So it's not that I don't like that as a principle, but yeah, we're sometimes too used to think about the solution and then go back to the need, and this is about an attempt to detect all the different needs, detect also how every person interprets the need, because it's the vision of the need is also not monocellular. It's an organism, and so yeah, that's kind of the approach.
Mm-hmm. This connects up to another question that I had in mind. So how would you say, but you touched on that quite well already, how would you say does it really help organizations learn and develop? So in a sense, or if you're a cynic, you could say, well, this is just an analytic description of the status quo. So but what do we really gain as an organization? But maybe even extrapolating from that, how does it help, or how would you hope does it help ecosystems evolve if you just bring together this information, this analytic view? How can this tool actually help improve, basically?
Okay, well, in a very idealistic world, we could say that if we start thinking with these methods, we automatically abandon a bit this idea that we're always in competition against someone, and we enter into opportunities, no? And so we can collaborate better, because in reality we're all a resource for someone, and everything can be a resource for us. So it's just a matter of being smart. And so that's kind of the high level. The lower level, like, okay, practically, what does that mean for me? I will share you the example of one of the set of the cards that are over there. So we kind of try to embed the. No, sorry. You're seeing the. What did I do? No. Okay, sorry. Yeah, these are the, you see the two sets of cards for the identity, and you see over here the big triads, and then you see one of the nodes of the triad that is light up, and it's the node of the individuals inside our organization, right? And in the individual inside the organization, we kind of asking this set of 6 questions. So what is the key motivation? How heavy is our workload? What is the role of talent? How do we deal with distress? what is our stance of work-related learning, and how do we deal with health problems. So sometimes, maybe not in this case, but sometimes some of these questions are taboo in a company. And so just by talking about these things, if we're open to do this, starting from the project team or and then opening up with even our stakeholders, that's already kind of a different way of looking at what we do. So when, you know, and then we have over here the other element, which is for each one of these high-level questions, it's what I was saying before. No, we have a set of statements that help, let's say, understand better what we mean by purpose, right? And so the statements related to purpose is, well, I contributed pro bono because it made me feel good. So I worked for free because I was happy. And do I agree with this or not? And so if we ask 10 people that work with us, is this happening or not? And then I'm ready to do this again in the future. Well, I worked pro bono, but now I kind of see things and I don't want to do it anymore. Or yes, of course, I will do it again. Or I would offer temporary reduction of my compensation. We're in trouble. I don't care. You can pay me less. But what I'm interested in really is in doing what to, or continuing. I don't contribute if I don't get paid. Someone in the team keeps me connected with our purpose. Nobody checks if I'm motivated or not. So all these kind of things are a way that, I mean, they're not a scientific proof of purpose, but at least it starts certain conversation about a topic that makes sense. And then the ambition in a certain sense is if someone comes up with a theoretical framework and tool to say specify better these dimensions, we plug it in and perfect. But at the moment, I think this is already kind of a dimension of or a level of discussion and conversation that that could really help even in a practical way, no, to understand what we're doing.
It's very interesting what you're saying, that basically it's not only about, well, the first thing that I also liked, another coincidence I think, is that you were talking about collaboration, and in the MOOC we are citing this this article by the Telegraph where they're talking about the golden age of collaboration, sort of moving from competitive advantage to really thinking about what can we do about this together, and also this power that you were saying that reflection has, right? So once you even start thinking about this, it might also provoke a shift in the mindset of people. Rather than looking at each other this way, they would be looking at either I don't know, making it look like this. And the other point that I also liked is that basically what you were saying is that it's also a tool for internal reflection, right? So that it's that you see it not only as a descriptive exercise, but really something that prompts in the I would even say in the extreme case processes of organizational change, right? So is that something
Yes.
that you intended, yes, or is that more of a byproduct of
I think
of
that
what you
actually
see happening?
The byproduct is actually what my clients want. No, in the sense, what the DG, the Director General, and so on, they want to understand how to develop policies better. But from my point of view, you cannot start from the development of the policy if you don't know what's happening on the ground. And so what you need to understand is a way to see what is happening, right? But not in the traditional flow that we have, is that you're looking in a prescriptive way, and this is what you should do, and if you don't do it, then we are in trouble, because life is life, right? And so there are things that you have to do, and especially when you are in a place like Europe that is very different, and you have so many different places and so many different ways of addressing the same problem. And you can't say this is the way to address the problem, because that's the way over there, but then it doesn't work somewhere else for several different reasons. So you need to understand how this problem is being addressed, and so how things are done, and then together we can decide, okay, it's you know, it's reasonable, it's humane, it's respect the environment, and so on and so on. I mean, it's very different to save the environment in Mediterranean or south of Italy or south of the set of problems over there are completely different if you have the discussion in the north of Europe or in the east or whatever. No, so we need to take this into account. And so yeah, I'm more interested in creating these discussions practical, focused on action at the level of the company, because then if I can be part of that conversation, I can understand what the conversation is about, and then I can understand what the principles behind those conversations are, and so I can kind of understand, then do my job as a policymaker.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a very great set of concluding words. So it's in a sense, how do you implement bottom-up? It's even an evidence-based approach in a sense. So it's really not based, as you were saying, on a scientific method, on hard evidence, but really gathering the experiences of people on the ground in the organizations, and then really informing policies thereby. And as you are saying, and what we often see in social economy, social entrepreneurship, but also social innovation, that a lot is really context dependent. It doesn't mean that it just exists in one place, but it means that you might have adaptations if you want to move it from one place to another. And I think it's a great tool of information also for decision makers, not only an organizational tool.
There is one key principle behind a bit all the tools that are inspired by complexity, and it's the idea of disintermediation. Right? If you're a policymaker, you need to get to what is happening and the concrete experience, because if you go through the interpretation of experts, you may be losing what it's actually. So, and this is a way of creating this intermediation, where then when you can bring in experts, but then you discuss on really the observation of what is happening.
Great. Thanks a lot, Alessandro, for your time. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. As the motto was last time, this is not the end of the discussion, this is the beginning. So please feel free to get in touch via email or social media and continue this discussion further. Next week, we're going to offer another webinar again on Thursday. I will need to check the time. It's going to be on impact investing and social finance. We're going to have Mark Cheng, who's an investor himself and advisor to Ashoka. So you're warmly invited to that. I will be sharing on the MOOC platform, emailing all of the participants, but also on social media. Thanks again, Alessandro, for being with us, and
Thank you,
to the group for participating. And we'll be in touch again soon, I hope. And I also hope that you're actually going to use the social economy canvas.
Yes, hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Ciao,
Thanks
ciao a
much,
tutti,
everyone.
ciao Valentino.
Bye-bye.